places where the dead don't rest. They wait. And on a windswept rock, 12 miles off the coast of Maine, something has been waiting for 150 years, held in place by nothing more than a beam of light cutting through the darkness. When that light goes out, they'll finish what they started. The documentary crew that arrived on September 14th to film a lighthouse decommissioning had no idea they were about to become part of the oldest trap ever set. The keeper's name was Samuel Thorne, 73 years old. 40 years he'd lived alone on that godforsaken island, tending a light that most people assumed was automated decades ago. When the crew stepped off the supply boat that morning, camera operator Maya Chen, director Robert Hastings, and sound engineer David Park, Samuel was waiting at the dock with a leather journal so worn the pages had gone soft as cloth. He didn't say hello, didn't introduce himself, just held out that journal and spoke 4 words that should have sent them straight back to the boat. "You'll understand tonight." Robert thought it was perfect. The grizzled old keeper playing up the mystery for the cameras. Eccentric lighthouse guardian delivers cryptic warning. It was documentary gold. They started filming immediately, Samuel walking the spiral stairs with the certainty of muscle memory. Samuel cleaning the massive Fresnel lens with movements that bordered on reverence. Samuel checking fuel levels, adjusting the rotation mechanism, performing the same rituals he'd performed for 14,600 nights. But Maya noticed something during the afternoon interview. When she asked Samuel why he never took a vacation, never had visitors, never left the island even for holidays, his hand trembled. Not the tremor of age, the tremor of fear. "The light," he said, staring past her at nothing. "The light must stay on, every night, without fail. Do you understand? Every single night." They didn't understand. Not then. The journal sat on the kitchen table in the keeper's quarters while they filmed B-roll of the island. David recorded the sound of waves against rocks. Maya captured the way. Afternoon sun turned the lighthouse stones amber and gold. Robert interviewed Samuel about the history of the structure. Built in 1873 after the wreck of the merchant ship Persephone claimed 97 lives on these very rocks. It wasn't until twilight, when that special blue light photographer's love settled over everything, that Robert actually opened the journal. He was looking for historical color, maybe some interesting anecdotes about storms or rescues. What he found instead made his stomach turn cold. 40 years of entries, each one dated, each one meticulous. Weather conditions, ship sightings, maintenance notes, all perfectly normal. Except for one thing that appeared in every single entry, sometimes multiple times. The light must stay on. If it goes dark, they come ashore. 40 years, 14,600 entries. The same warning, over and over, in handwriting that grew more desperate with each passing year. Robert laughed. Had to be performance art, right? The old man setting up atmosphere for their documentary. He showed the others. Maya frowned. David made a joke about method acting, but none of them could shake the feeling that Samuel Thorne wasn't performing. The fear in his eyes was real. The tremor in his hands was real. And the way he checked the light every 30 minutes, as if his life depended on it, that was real too. The sun set at 7:43 p.m. Samuel activated the light manually, even though the automatic systems were perfectly functional. The moment that beam swept out across the dark water, something changed in him. A relief so profound, it was almost physical. He exhaled like a man who'd been holding his breath underwater. "You'll want to stay inside tonight," he said. "Don't go near the windows when the light passes. And whatever you do, don't go outside." Robert was setting up cameras to capture the light rotation. Maya was checking audio levels. David was making coffee. They barely registered the warning. The first rotation happened at 8:17 p.m. Maya saw them first. She was adjusting a camera angle, looking through the viewfinder as the light beam swept across the rocks below. The viewfinder captured what her naked eye might have missed. Figures standing in the water, dozens of them, perfectly motionless, facing the lighthouse. She jerked back from the camera, looked with her own eyes, saw nothing but dark water and foam, looked through the viewfinder again as the beam completed its rotation and swept back. There they were. Men, women, children, standing in water that should have been over their heads, wearing clothes from another century. Waterlogged fabric hanging from skeletal frames, eyes open and staring, mouths slack, not moving, not breathing, just standing there in the moment of death. "Robert," her voice came out as a whisper. "Robert, you need to see this." He looked through the viewfinder, went white. David looked next, started swearing softly, continuously, a prayer of denial. Because it wasn't dozens. As their eyes adjusted, as they counted the figures in each sweep of light, they realized there were hundreds, packed shoulder to shoulder in the water, a forest of the drowned surrounding the island on all sides. Samuel stood in the doorway. He wasn't surprised. He'd lived with this for 40 years. "The Persephone didn't sink," he said quietly. "It was scuttled. Insurance fraud. The captain and first mate took the lifeboats and left everyone else locked below decks. 97 souls drowned right here, thrashing in the water, screaming for help that never came. The lighthouse keeper at the time, my predecessor's predecessor, he could hear them dying, could see them in the water by moonlight. By morning, they were gone." He paused. The light rotated. The figures stood frozen in their eternal drowning. But they weren't gone. They were waiting. 6 months later, the lighthouse went dark during a storm. Generator failure. When they got it running again at dawn, the keeper and his family were gone. Just gone. Found their bodies 3 days later, washed up on the mainland, drowned, in their beds, miles from the ocean. Robert's journalist brain fought against it. Rationalization, mass hallucination, optical illusion, something in the water refracting light. But the camera didn't hallucinate. The viewfinder showed them clear as day. Victorian-era clothing, faces locked in expressions of terror and betrayal, hands reaching upward toward a surface they'd never reach. "The light holds them," Samuel continued, "freezes them in the moment between death and whatever comes after. They're trapped in the drowning, experiencing it over and over, unable to complete the transition. But if the light goes out..." He didn't finish. Didn't need to. David was frantically reviewing his audio files. "I'm picking up something," he said, his voice shaking. "Underwater sounds. Muffled. Christ, their muffled voices. Screaming." The light rotated. The figures remained perfectly still. But now, knowing what to look for, they could see it. The almost imperceptible drift. Every time the beam passed and returned, the figures were closer to shore. Inches. Just inches. But closer. "How long do we have?" Robert asked. Samuel checked his watch with the automatic gesture of a man who'd been counting down for decades. "The decommissioning is scheduled for 6:08 a.m. They're shutting down the light during the transfer to the automated system. 17-minute dark period while they swap over the power systems. Maya did the math in her head. Each rotation, the figures moved closer. 17 minutes of darkness. How far will they get? Samuel's face was grey. I don't know. I've never let the light go out. Not once in 40 years. I've repaired generators in hurricanes, climbed the tower with broken ribs, had a heart attack on those stairs 5 years ago, and I kept crawling up because the light was flickering. But tomorrow, his voice cracked. Tomorrow they're forcing the shutdown, and I can't stop it. The journal's final entry. They read it together by flashlight, unwilling to turn their backs on those windows. Samuel's handwriting deteriorated into barely legible scrawl. New keepers arrive tomorrow. The light will go dark during the transfer. I'm sorry. There's nowhere to run on an island. I've failed. 40 years of vigilance ending because of bureaucracy and budget cuts and men who don't believe in things they can't put in spreadsheets. The drowned are patient. They've waited 150 years. They can wait one more night, and when the light goes dark, they'll finish their journey to shore. They died reaching for dry land. They'll have it, and anyone standing on it. Robert made the decision. We call for emergency extraction. Now. The radio went out with the last storm, Samuel said. I reported it. They said they'd fix it during the decommissioning. Satellite phone. No signal this far out. The boat won't be back until they deliver the decommissioning crew at 5:20 a.m. Trapped. They were trapped on a rock in the middle of the ocean with hundreds of drowned ghosts waiting for the light to fail. The sick genius of it became clear. Samuel had been the bait. The lonely old keeper, retiring, needing replacement staff on site for the transfer. The perfect trap. Fresh bodies to pull into the water, to replace the drowned, to restart the cycle. Why? Maya's voice was steady despite everything. Why do they need replacements? Samuel stared out at the rotating light. Because they want to stop drowning. The light traps them in the moment of death. But new drownings might give them enough connection to the living world to break free. Or maybe they're just angry at the keeper who heard them dying and did nothing. Angry at being frozen in agony for a century and a half. Maybe they just want to share what was done to them. The night stretched on. They took turns watching through the viewfinder, documenting the impossible. The figures never moved when the light touched them, frozen like a paused film. But in the darkness between rotations, they surged forward. By midnight, they'd reached the rocks at the base of the lighthouse. By 2 a.m., they were on the rocks themselves, seaweed-wrapped hands gripping stone. By 4 a.m., some of them were close enough that the crew could see individual features. A woman in a waterlogged dress, her face blue, mouth open in an eternal scream. A child, maybe 7 years old, arms outstretched. A man in a ship captain's uniform, gold buttons tarnished black, eyes filled with the betrayal of his final moments. They tried everything. Barricading doors. Pointless. These things lived in water. Wouldn't stop them. Looking for weapons? What do you fight with against something that's already dead? Prayer. David tried, words stumbling over themselves, but the figures kept coming. Samuel sat by the light mechanism, maintaining it with automatic precision. 40 years of ritual. He'd known this night was coming, had probably known for years. The journal entries growing more desperate, more resigned. This wasn't the warning of a man hoping to be saved. It was the confession of a man who'd accepted his execution date. But 8 a.m. came with the sound of a boat engine. The decommissioning crew, 3 technicians who thought they were just installing an automated system. Robert ran to the dock, screaming warnings. The technicians looked at him like he was insane. Behind him, the lighthouse beam swept across, hundreds of figures now pressed against the tower base, crawling over rocks, a mass of drowned dead, stopped only by that rotating light. You don't understand. Robert grabbed the lead technician. You can't shut down the light. You can't. The technician pulled free. Sir, this is scheduled maintenance. We need you to step back. He had paperwork, procedures, a job to complete. The bureaucracy Samuel had warned about, grinding forward with the unstoppable momentum of men who believed in schedules and regulations and nothing else. They entered the lighthouse at 5:47 a.m., began the shutdown procedure at 5:54 a.m. Samuel stood at the top of the tower, one hand on the light mechanism, 40 years of vigilance ending in mechanical clicking as systems powered down. The light went dark at 6 a.m. exactly. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. The documentary crew, the decommissioning team, Samuel, everyone held their breath in the sudden, absolute darkness. 3 seconds of silence so complete, it hurt. Then the screaming started. Not from them, from outside. From hundreds of throats that hadn't drawn breath in over a century. The sound of drowning victims, finally allowed to complete their death, or to escape it. The sound of rage held in check for 150 years being released all at once. The technicians heard it. Suddenly, they believed. Maya kept the camera rolling, documentary instinct, or maybe just denial, pretending that recording it made it less real. Through the viewfinder in the pre-dawn darkness, she captured what happened next. The figures moved, not walking, surging like a wave, water flowing uphill, defying gravity and death, and everything that separated the drowned from the living. They poured through windows that were suddenly permeable as water. They rose through floorboards. They emerged from shadows that were deeper than they should be. Samuel never ran. He stood at the top of the tower, hand still on the dark light mechanism, waiting. When they reached him, the woman in the Victorian dress laden, water streaming from her hair and clothes. He closed his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." They pulled him down. Not violently, almost gently, the way water pulls, the way drowning feels at the end, when you stop fighting and the ocean cradles you into darkness. By the time Robert and the others climbed the stairs, Samuel was gone. No body. Just wet footprints leading to a window too small for a man to fit through. The lighthouse beam stayed dark for 17 minutes. The decommissioning crew got the automated system running at 6:17 a.m., hands shaking so badly they nearly botched the installation twice. When the light swept back across the rocks, the figures were gone. But Samuel wasn't the only one who disappeared that night. One of the technicians, a young guy named Marcus, 24 years old, new to the job, went missing during the darkness. They found him 3 days later, washed up on the mainland, drowned. His lungs full of salt water despite being found 100 feet from the ocean. The documentary never aired. The footage was confiscated, classified as evidence in an ongoing investigation that went nowhere. Official reports listed Samuel Thorne as missing, presumed lost at sea. Marcus Rivera drowned in a tragic accident. The lighthouse transitioned successfully to automated operation. But Maya kept a copy of the footage, And she noticed something the officials missed. In the final frames, just before the light came back on, you can see something in the darkness at the top of the tower. A figure standing where Samuel had stood, wearing Samuel's clothes, maintaining the light with 40 years of practiced ritual. The light stays on now. Automated systems, redundant backups, emergency generators. It never goes dark. Not for maintenance, not for storms, not ever. The official reason is navigational safety. The real reason is simpler. They're still there, standing in the water, waiting, frozen in the moment between death and whatever comes after, held in place by nothing more than a beam of light cutting through the darkness. And up in the lighthouse, impossible to see unless you know where to look, a keeper still tends the light. Samuel Thorne never left his post. Couldn't leave it. Because the only thing worse than 40 years of vigilance is an eternity of it. The drowned claimed him, yes, but they made him one of them. Forever frozen in his own moment of death, maintaining the light that holds them all in place. The perfect punishment, the perfect trap. The lighthouse still stands, still operates, still turns. And if you visit on a dark night, if you look through a camera viewfinder, as the light sweeps across the water, you'll see them. Hundreds of figures standing motionless in the waves. And if you look very carefully at the top of the tower, you'll see him too. Samuel Thorne, still performing his ritual, still checking the mechanisms, still making sure the light never ever goes dark. Because he learned the truth that night. The drowned don't want to come ashore anymore. They have what they wanted. They have a keeper, someone to share their eternal drowning, someone to understand their suffering, and he'll maintain that light forever, frozen in his own moment of terror, ensuring that the dead stay exactly where they are. The light must stay on. If it goes dark, they come ashore. Samuel knew it, and now, so do we. But here's what keeps me awake at night. What the official reports don't mention, what even Maya's footage couldn't quite capture. In the final frame before the light came back on, in the darkness at the moment of transition, there were more figures standing in the water than when the night began. Just a few more. Just enough more. The lighthouse still advertises for keepers occasionally. Automated maintenance, they say. Easy job, they say. 6-month rotations. Good pay. Remote location for those seeking solitude. Applications welcome. And people still apply. Because people always need jobs. Always need money. Always believe that the warnings don't apply to them. The light must stay on. It always stays on now. But the island is still there. The rocks are still there. And the drowned are always waiting for the next time someone believes that darkness is just the absence of light and not the presence of everything we've tried to forget. The light must stay on. And so must this channel. If this story kept you frozen in dread, hit that subscribe button. There are more horrors waiting in the darkness. Drop a comment telling me which part made your blood run cold. Share this with someone who thinks lighthouses are romantic. And hit that like button. Because the drowned are always watching and they appreciate good taste. Until the next beam of light cuts through the darkness, stay vigilant. If the drowned kept you awake, subscribe for more nightmares. Comment which moment haunted you most. Share this with someone who needs to fear the ocean. Like if you'll never look at a lighthouse the same way again. The light stays on, and so do I.